The courtroom was silent. The tension so thick it felt suffocating. Every seat was occupied. Reporters scribbled furiously. And the audience shifted uncomfortably, waiting for the final verdict in one of the most high-profile trials of the year. Judge Jacob Turner, a man known for his firm and no-nonsense demeanor, adjusted his glasses and nodded toward the prosecutor, just as she cleared her throat to deliver her closing argument. A sharp, unexpected voice rang through the courtroom. "That's not true. You're all wrong." A gasp rippled through the crowd like an electric shock. Heads whipped around, searching for the source of the voice. There, standing in the aisle, was a young girl no older than 10 clutching a worn-out stuffed rabbit. Her eyes were wide, her small hands trembling. Yet her voice carried unwavering determination. Judge Turner narrowed his gaze, then leaned forward. "Go on, Lily. We're all listening." The small town of Willow Creek was the kind of place where everyone knew each other. Life was simple, quiet, and predictable, at least for most people. But for Lily Carter, a 10-year-old girl with an insatiable curiosity, normal was never enough. She lived with her mother, Sarah Carter, in a modest house on Pine Street. Life had never been easy for them. After her father passed away, Sarah worked long hours at Golden Diner to provide for the two of them. The pay was barely enough to make ends meet. But she never complained. She just kept going, day after day, her hands smelling of coffee and grilled cheese sandwiches. Lily spent most of her afternoons at the diner, sitting in the corner booth, doing homework while watching her mother rush from table to table. But on one particular afternoon, something changed. It started with something simple: a favor. "Lily, sweetheart, can you do me a quick favor?" Sarah called out from behind the counter, balancing a tray full of plates. "Can you take this food upstairs to Mr. Howard's office? He's swamped and can't come down." Lily nodded, grabbing the takeout bag. Mr. Howard was the owner of Golden Diner, a serious-looking man who always seemed too busy for small talk. She had been in his office a few times before, just a cluttered space filled with stacks of invoices and a loud, buzzing computer. She climbed the narrow staircase to the second floor and knocked twice before stepping inside. "Mr. Howard," she called. But there was no answer. His office was empty. Papers were spread across his desk. A half-finished cup of coffee sat beside his keyboard. And a printer was still whirring, spitting out pages of numbers. Lily placed the bag on his desk, ready to leave. But something caught her eye. A stack of financial documents lay open in the middle of his desk, the numbers highlighted in red. The words "transfer" and "accounts" stood out, along with something else, a name she recognized: Jonathan Brooks. Lily frowned. That was the same man she had heard about on TV. The businessman accused of embezzling millions from investors. The trial had been all over the news for weeks. What was his name doing on Mr. Howard's desk? Her heart pounded as she stepped closer. The documents showed a series of small but frequent money transfers, amounts just small enough to avoid suspicion. But when added together, they totaled millions. She didn't know much about banking, but something felt off. If Jonathan Brooks had stolen the money, why was it still moving between accounts? Lily glanced toward the door. Mr. Howard still wasn't back. She made a split-second decision. She grabbed the freshly printed pages from the printer, stuffed them into her backpack, and hurried downstairs, her hands slightly shaking. That night, Lily sat cross-legged on her bed, her laptop balanced on her knees. The soft glow of the screen illuminated her face as she searched online for the company names and account numbers listed in the documents. At first, nothing seemed strange. But as she dug deeper, she found something shocking. Some of these companies didn't even exist. Fake businesses. Fake accounts. Someone was moving the stolen money under everyone's noses. But why? And more importantly, who? Her stomach twisted as she stared at the screen. This wasn't just embezzlement. This was a cover-up. Lily's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Should she tell someone? Would anyone believe her, a 10-year-old girl over a courtroom full of lawyers and accountants? She printed the documents anyway, stuffing them into her backpack. She didn't know what to do next. But one thing was clear: this wasn't a mistake. This was a secret. And secrets were dangerous. The autumn air was crisp as Lily Carter stepped out of the town library. Her backpack slung over one shoulder, stuffed with the printed documents she had found. The sun was setting, painting the sky in deep shades of orange and purple. She shivered slightly, not from the cold, but from a feeling she couldn't quite explain. As she walked down the quiet streets toward home, she became aware of a presence. At first, she thought it was just her imagination. But the longer she walked, the more certain she became. It wasn't driving too close, but it stayed behind her, turning every time she turned, stopping every time she stopped. Her heart pounded. Lily's pulse hammered in her ears as she quickened her pace. Her hands clenched into fists, her breath coming in short gasps. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe. But when she turned onto her street, her stomach tightened like a fist. She didn't just walk, she ran. And just as her foot hit the porch, the black car roared past, tires screeching against the pavement before disappearing into the night. Lily's hands trembled as she unlocked the door and rushed inside. She dropped her backpack on the floor and pulled out her phone. A new message flashed across her screen. Stop digging. This is your only warning. Her breath caught in her throat. Someone new. That night, Lily lay in bed, the room shrouded in darkness. But sleep wouldn't come. Every creak of the house made her jump. Every passing car outside made her heart race. She clutched her stuffed rabbit to her chest, its soft fur a small comfort against the growing fear pressing down on her. Then a sound. A faint click at the front door. Her body stiffened. At first, she thought maybe it was her mother coming home late from work. But then came another sound, the door handle rattling. Someone was trying to get in. Lily's heart pounded so hard she was afraid it would give her away. Then, the door creaked open. She barely had time to react before she heard heavy footsteps moving across the wooden floor. Someone was inside the house. She threw off her blanket and slid to the floor, her bare feet cold against the hardwood. Every sound in the house seemed amplified, the floorboards creaking beneath her. The distant hum of the fridge. She had to hide. Now. The closet loomed ahead. The door slightly ajar. If she could just squeeze in behind the hanging clothes, maybe he wouldn't find her. She slipped inside. Her breathing shallow. Pulling the door shut just as the footsteps stopped outside her room. The intruder was right there. Through the slats of the closet door. She saw the shadow of a man standing in the doorway. He didn't move at first. Just stood there. As if listening. Lily pressed her stuffed rabbit to her mouth. Biting down on the fabric to stop herself from making a sound. Then. The man stepped inside. Her entire body went rigid. She squeezed her eyes shut. Praying he wouldn't check the closet. Please go away. Please go away. She heard him rummaging through her desk drawers. Flipping through papers. Searching for something. The documents. He was looking for the documents. Lily's stomach twisted. If he found them, would he leave? Or would he come looking for her next? Then, just as he moved toward the closet, a loud burst of sirens outside. Red and blue lights flashed through the window. The man froze. For a moment. The room was utterly silent. Then, in a rush, the man turned and bolted out of the room. Lily stayed completely still. Too terrified to move. She heard the front door slam. Then the distant sound of tires screeching as the car outside sped away. Only then did she dare to breathe. Tears stung her eyes as she clutched her stuffed rabbit tighter. Her entire body trembling. Someone had broken into her house. And they were looking for her. Lily barely slept that night. Every shadow on the walls felt like the intruder returning. By morning, she sat at the kitchen table. Her hands curled around a mug of hot chocolate that had long since gone cold. Her mother, Sarah, paced back and forth. Her face etched with worry. This has gone too far. Lily, she said. Shaking her head. Someone broke into our house. What if they had found you? Lily swallowed hard. She didn't know how to explain it to her mother, the feeling deep in her chest that she couldn't just walk away from this. Instead of arguing, she reached into her backpack and pulled out the stack of documents she had taken from Mr. Howard's office. I think I know someone who can help, she said. An hour later, they were sitting in the cluttered office of Mr. James Bennett. An old family friend and one of the few honest lawyers in town. He was a broad-shouldered man with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Bennett adjusted his reading glasses as he flipped through the financial documents Lily had gathered. The longer he read, the deeper the frown on his face became. Finally, he exhaled sharply, setting the papers down. This isn't just embezzlement, he muttered, rubbing his temple. This is money laundering. Someone has been funneling millions through fake accounts for years. Sarah leaned forward. Her expression tense. But I thought Jonathan Brooks was the one accused of stealing the money? Bennett shook his head. That's what they want people to believe. But these transfers didn't stop after Brooks was arrested. Which means... Lily's voice was barely above a whisper. Someone else is behind it. Bennett nodded grimly. And I think I know who. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out an old case file. He flipped to a page with a photograph of a man in his 50s. Clean cut. Wearing an expensive suit. Victor Reynolds. Lily's stomach twisted. She recognized that name. He was the head of the local police department. Bennett tapped the photo. Reynolds has been under suspicion for years. But no one has ever been able to pin anything on him. If these documents are real, it means he's the one running the operation. And Brooks is just a scapegoat. Sarah's face paled. You're saying the police are covering this up? Yes. Bennett confirmed. And if Reynolds finds out we have this evidence, he won't stop coming after you. Lily clenched her fists. So what do we do? Bennett sighed. We need more than just documents. We need a witness. Someone who was on the inside, someone who knows what really happened. He pulled out another file and placed it on the desk. Inside was a photo of a woman with tired eyes and a wary expression. Rachel Clemens. She used to work for one of Reynolds' shell companies. She left under mysterious circumstances. If anyone knows the truth, it's her. Lily exchanged a glance with her mother. They had found the missing piece. Now, they just had to find Rachel before it was too late. The road stretched endlessly before them, winding through dense woods shrouded in fog. The headlights of Mr. Bennett's car cut through the darkness, casting long shadows against the trees. Lily sat in the back seat, clutching her stuffed rabbit, her heart hammering with anticipation. Beside her, Sarah Carter, her mother, kept glancing nervously at the rearview mirror, as if expecting someone to be following them. We're close, Bennett said, his voice tense. Rachel's been hiding out in an old hunting cabin. If she's still there, she might be able to tell us everything. The car slowed as they reached a narrow dirt road. The cabin loomed in the distance, barely visible in the dim moonlight. It looked abandoned, its wooden walls weathered, the windows covered in grime. Bennett killed the engine. Stay close, he whispered as they stepped out. They approached the door cautiously. Bennett knocked twice. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a shuffle from inside. The door creaked open just a crack, revealing Rachel Clemens, a thin woman with tired eyes and unkempt hair. The moment she saw them, fear flashed across her face. I told you I don't know anything, she hissed, starting to shut the door. Bennett placed his foot against the frame. Rachel, listen to me. We have proof that Reynolds is laundering money. We need your help. Rachel hesitated, then sighed heavily and stepped aside. Inside, the cabin was bare, lit only by a dim oil lamp. Papers were scattered across a wooden table, and a small fire crackled in the fireplace. Rachel crossed her arms. You don't understand what you're up against, she muttered. Victor Reynolds isn't just laundering money. He controls the police. He decides what cases get buried and who takes the fall. Lily's stomach twisted. So, Jonathan Brooks is innocent? Rachel nodded. He was a convenient target. Reynolds needed a scapegoat, and Brooks fit the bill. Sarah's voice shook. If this is true, Why haven't you come forward? Rachel let out a hollow laugh. Because people who try to expose him end up. A loud crack outside cut her off. A car door slammed. Then another. Rachel's face went pale. "Oh no," she whispered. "They found me." From outside. A voice bellowed through the night. "Find them. They can't have gone far." Bennett rushed to the window and cursed under his breath. "They're armed." Rachel grabbed a small bag from under the table. "There's a back door we have to run." Lily didn't need to be told twice. She clutched her mother's hand as they bolted out into the dark forest. The cold air stung her cheeks as they ran through the trees. Their breath coming in sharp gasps. Then gunshots. The sound tore through the silence. Echoing through the woods. "Keep running," Bennett urged. His voice low but urgent. Lily's legs burned as she sprinted. Her stuffed rabbit gripped tightly in her arms. The forest was thick. Branches scraping against her skin. The shadows shifting with every step. Behind them. Footsteps crashed through the underbrush. Rachel suddenly pointed ahead. "Gas station there." Through the trees. The flickering neon lights of a gas station came into view. They burst out of the woods. Racing toward the door. Rachel slammed her hand against the glass. Gasping for breath. The attendant behind the counter, a young man, stared at them in shock. Bennett didn't waste a second. He grabbed the landline and dialed. "We need police. Now." Outside. The shadows shifted. Their pursuers were still out there. And they weren't giving up that easily. The gas station's neon lights flickered against the dark road, casting long shadows across the pavement. Inside. Bennett hung up the phone. His expression grim. "The police won't help," he said. "Reynolds has too much control." Rachel clenched her fists. "Then we do this ourselves." She turned to Lily and her mother. "Jessica." And pulled out a crumpled piece of paper from her bag. She laid it on the counter. It was a map. "This is it," she whispered. "Reynolds' warehouse." Lily's eyes widened. "That's where he's hiding the real evidence?" Rachel nodded. "Financial records. Transaction histories, everything that proves he's behind the money laundering. If we can get to it before he realizes we know, we can expose him." Jessica hesitated. "This is dangerous. If we get caught." "We won't," Bennett assured her. "We get in. Grab what we need. And get out." Jessica swallowed hard. Then nodded. "Okay. Let's finish this." The warehouse loomed in the distance. An abandoned structure. Its rusted metal exterior barely visible in the moonlight. Bennett cut the engine. And the group climbed out of the car. Everything was eerily silent. Jessica exhaled shakily. "Are we sure no one's here?" Rachel led them to a side door. Slightly ajar. "He doesn't expect anyone to find this place." They slipped inside. The air was cold and stale. Rows of metal shelves stretched across the vast space. Crates stacked high. Each one labeled with obscure serial numbers. A faint hum of machinery echoed from somewhere deep within. Rachel quickly moved to a desk in the far corner. Rifling through folders. It has to be here. Lily's heart pounded as she scanned the room. Then her eyes landed on a set of locked filing cabinets. Here, she whispered. Pointing. Bennett rushed over. Pulling a lockpicking kit from his pocket. Within seconds, the drawer clicked open. He grabbed a stack of flash drives and hard copies of bank records. This is it, he murmured. Enough to bring Reynolds down. Then a sharp noise. Footsteps. Rachel's face went pale. We're not alone. Suddenly, floodlights burst to life. The warehouse doors slammed open. 3 armed men stormed in. Drop everything, one of them barked. Raising his gun. Lily gasped. Gripping her stuffed rabbit as fear shot through her veins. Bennett shoved the documents into his bag. Run, he whispered. Rachel didn't hesitate. She snatched up a metal pipe. Swinging hard. The crack of metal against bone echoed through the warehouse. The man stumbled back. Cursing. "G.O.," she screamed. Now. The warehouse erupted into chaos as Rachel fought off the attackers, giving the others a chance to escape. Jessica grabbed Lily's hand. Move. Bennett led the way, darting between crates as bullets ripped through the air. Lily looked back just in time to see Rachel, her body slammed to the ground as a gunshot echoed through the warehouse. No. Jessica pulled Lily away, tears burning in her eyes. They burst through a side exit, sprinting into the night. Behind them, the warehouse was filled with shouting and gunfire. Bennett clutched the bag of evidence as they reached the car. He threw it into the back seat, his hands shaking. Lily's voice trembled. Rachel, she didn't. Jessica wrapped an arm around her, holding her tight. We'll make sure her sacrifice wasn't in vain. Bennett started the engine. We have to expose Reynolds. Now. With one last look at the burning warehouse behind them, they sped off into the night. The car sped down the empty highway, the weight of Rachel's sacrifice pressing heavily on them. Lily sat in the back seat, gripping her stuffed rabbit, her hands still shaking. Bennett's jaw was clenched as he gripped the steering wheel. We have to act fast, before Reynolds realizes what we've taken. Jessica turned to him. What do we do? Bennett didn't hesitate. We go public. They pulled into a safe house, an old office building Bennett had access to. Inside, he pulled out his laptop, plugged in the flash drives, and began uploading the files. Lily and Jessica watched as pages of bank statements, wire transfers, and incriminating emails flashed across the screen. Bennett typed furiously, attaching the files to multiple emails. To FBI headquarters, The New York Times, The Washington Post, Channel 6 News. Subject: Urgent, evidence of police corruption and money laundering. He hit send. A moment of silence passed. Then, Lily's phone buzzed. She looked down and gasped. The news was already breaking. Breaking news: Massive money laundering scandal exposed, high-ranking officer under investigation. The story spread like wildfire. Within hours, every major news outlet was covering it. By morning, the FBI had raided Reynolds' office and home. Television screens across the country lit up with the shocking headline: Police Chief Victor Reynolds arrested in corruption scandal. Multi-million-dollar money laundering scheme uncovered. Lily watched from the safe house, her breath catching as the screen flickered with live footage. Victor Reynolds, once untouchable, was shoved into the back of a police car, his face twisted with fury. His empire wasn't just crumbling. It was burning to the ground. The truth was finally out. A few hours later, a follow-up report flashed on the screen. Jonathan Brooks cleared of all charges. Lily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The fight was over. Rachel's sacrifice hadn't been in vain.